Good evening and welcome to the special business meeting of Council of the District of Squamish this October 20th, 2020. Welcome to the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. I am Councillor Doug Race, acting mayor this month. As the public may know, we typically chair our meetings from City Hall, which is where I'm sitting. For logistics reasons, the mayor is unable to be here today, is attending by video, but I will be chairing this meeting. I'm first looking for a motion to adopt the amended agenda. The agenda has been amended by the addition of language to the resolution in item 10B4 about the grant support for Sea to Sky Electric Vehicle Network and the addition of one letter received. Apart from that, is there a motion to approve the amended agenda? Moved by Mayor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Pettingill. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And our first matter is proclamation of World Polio Day. And Mr. Finley, I see you're here. The floor is yours.
Motion.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Hang on a sec. I forgot the motion. So there is a ministerial order M192 that requires a motion to be passed. And the motion is that pursuant to ministerial order M192, the District of Squamish is allowing limited in-person public attendance at this October 20th, 2020 special business meeting. The district is ensuring openness, transparency, accessibility, and accountability at this meeting by the following means. This meeting is being live streamed. A video of this meeting will be available on the district's website for viewing on an on-demand basis. The meeting is open to the public for electronic participation, and limited public attendance is available at Glennon Park Recreation Center. Is there a mover for that resolution? Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Are there any notices of motion? Seeing none, we will proceed to delegations, petitions, proclamations. Proclamation for World Polio Day. Now, Mr. Finley, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chairman Race. Good evening, Mayor Elliott and councillors. And thank you very much for the invitation to join you this evening. If you remember, we met about a year ago, and I was able to give you an update on Rotary and our campaign to eradicate polio from the world. And once again, this Saturday is World Polio Day. It's an opportunity for us to celebrate the progress we have made and to recognize all the people and the frontline workers who are working so hard to make our vision of a polio-free world a reality. And 40 years ago, when Rotary embarked on this journey, polio was endemic in 125 countries, and there were over 1,000 cases of people being paralyzed each day by this terrible disease. But we have made some significant progress. Recently, in August, we reached another major milestone when the Africa region was declared free of the wild polio virus. And it has now been eradicated in 5 of the 6 World Health Organization regions. And it leaves only 2 countries where the virus is endemic, in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and there were less than 200 cases last year in 2019. So to date, Rotary and our partners, we've vaccinated over 3 billion children. Wow. And this has resulted in 19 million people who are walking today who would have otherwise been paralyzed. However, earlier this year, due to the pandemic, polio immunization campaigns were suspended, and the polio eradication resources and the infrastructure were repurposed and devoted to fighting the COVID-19 virus. The impact of this has been that over 80 million children have missed being immunized against polio, and at the same time, measles, diphtheria, and the other vaccine-preventable diseases where the vaccinations usually occurred at the same time as the polio vaccinations. The campaigns are now restarting, and we need to catch up and redouble our efforts to prevent polio from resurfacing in the vulnerable countries. So we need to continue our advocacy, create awareness, and most important, raise funds to enable us to continue our mission to eradicate polio. So in September this year, the 4 Rotary clubs in the Sea to Sky corridor here in Whistler, in Squamish, and in Pemberton ran an event called Pedal for Polio, where we encouraged people to pedal, ride, run, walk, and raise funds for polio. As a result of that fun campaign, we raised over $17,000 in the 4 Rotary clubs. And when that is tripled by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, that provides the funds to purchase over 60,000 doses of the polio vaccine. So today, I would invite Council to join us, to join Rotary and our partners in the campaign to end polio. And I ask you to proclaim Saturday, October the 24th, 2020, as World Polio Day in the District of Squamish. And I'd be pleased to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you for your time.
Are there any questions, Council? No. The staff recommendation is that Council proclaim October 24th, 2020 as World Polio Day in the District of Squamish. Is there a mover of that recommendation? Councillor Pettengill moves. Councillor French seconds. Any further discussion? We'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Finley. That's great work, and I know you're personally dedicated to this, and thank you very much for all your efforts for this.
And I thank you to all of you for your support. Thank you very much.
Moving on to the next item on the agenda is consideration of unscheduled public attendance. Is there anybody that has anything they wish to bring to the attention of Council? Is timely and could not wait until the next business meeting in 2 weeks. Seeing none, and there are none, I believe, at Brennan Park, we will move on. There are no public hearings tonight. There is one scheduled item, Community Planning and Infrastructure, Development Permit 505. Before we start on that, let me read out a notice. Proponents and members of the public will be given the opportunity to be heard electronically via telephone or from your computer with respect to the proposed variances to the District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200/2011. There is limited in-person attendance and participation available at Brennan Park for those who are unable to participate electronically or to watch the live stream. There are 2 proposed variances to the zoning bylaw, and the proposed variances are outlined in the staff report. Number 1, proposed variance to section 41.11 sub B sub I, design criteria, landscaping to be varied to having no requirement for a continuous landscape strip. And number 2 is proposed variance to section 41.11 sub B sub II, design criteria, landscaping to be varied to have no requirement for landscaped islands. Details to participate via telephone or the WebEx platform are displayed on the screen for those who have logged in from your computer or watching a live stream of the meeting and are included on the district's website. In order to get on the speakers list, please raise your hand via telephone, which is *3, or via WebEx by opening the participant panel and by clicking on the hand icon. Please note that when it is your turn to speak, you will receive a voice prompt via telephone or a dialog box via WebEx on the computer. Please commence your remarks by clearly stating your name and address or neighborhood. Please note that speakers will be given a maximum of 5 minutes to address Council. If you experience technical difficulties, please use the chat function to send the host a message or email hearing@squamish.ca. With that, Ms. Fletcher, I believe this is your presentation. And you're muted.
There we go. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jessie Fletcher, planner with Community Planning. Tonight I'm presenting development permit number 505 located at 39319 Queensway. This DP application seeks to allow for the construction of one light industrial building on a cleared disturbed site located at the northern end of the Sea to Sky Business Park. The OCP land use designation is industrial business, as are the majority of the adjacent sites, save for the site to the west, which is designated intensive industrial. The subject site is zoned I-11 Business Park Industrial, which accommodates a range of industrial uses, as are the adjacent properties to the northwest and south. Properties to the east are zoned I-8 Specialized Industrial Business. The subject site is within DPA 3, which was established to regulate the form and character of new development, and the subject site is also within DPA 2, the protection from flood hazard. The property to the north has an approved DP for 2 light industrial buildings, while the property to the west is undeveloped. The property to the south has 2 existing light industrial buildings. The properties to the east are developed with light industrial buildings comprising a range of uses. The subject site is constrained by 3 statutory right-of-ways, 1 for the water pipe, 1 for a Fortis gas line, and 1 for a stormwater pipe. 2 of these statutory right-of-ways are in favor of the district. Each of these restricts what can be placed on the ground above. Specifically, landscaping and concrete are prohibited, while asphalt and gravel are acceptable. This has required design considerations and variances to the zoning bylaw, which will be covered later in my presentation. This is the proposed site plan. 1 vehicle access is provided off of Queensway. Ample space is provided for loading. Pedestrian access is provided off of Queensway and includes an accessible ramp up to the sidewalk. Principal on-site walkway has a continuous weather protection. Vehicle parking exceeds the minimum zoning requirement. 31 vehicle spaces are provided on site, or only 27 are required. The proposed development consists of 1 precast concrete industrial building. The building is single-story with mezzanine space above. The number of units is unknown at this time, but could allow for up to 8 individual units. The main construction material is concrete. The building is adorned with decorative fins and a continuous glass awning for both weather protection and visual interest. The proposed landscaping consists of drought-resistant landscaping where possible and a hardy mix of deciduous and coniferous plantings along Queensway, adding to the local plant diversity. The addition of coniferous Alaskan cedars along Queensway will help keep greenery along Queensway during the winter months. Seating is proposed along the front of the building with local boulders and river rock to add visual interest. The project was presented to Advisory Design Panel on April 30th, 2020. The panel was generally supportive of the project, but had a few recommendations for the applicant to resolve with staff. A full summary of changes is included in your report package this evening. Some of the changes highlighted on the screen include increased and covered Class B bicycle parking, internal tactile strips in units with internal ramping. The development signage was increased in size, and the address numbers were made black to increase contrast for the visually limited. The outdoor space has remained similar, but rather than logs for sitting, the applicant is providing benches, and the loading has been removed from the adjacent location, which provides less vehicle-dominated area for respite. DP 505 requires 2 variances to the zoning bylaw. Both variances are in response to limitations placed on the site by way of the statutory right-of-ways for utilities. The first variance is to section 41. This section requires that a parking area be screened by a continuous landscape buffer of 2 meters. The southern and part of the western lot line are proposed to be free of landscaping to comply with the terms of the statutory right-of-way. In this instance, the variance speaks to completely eliminating landscape strips to keep the variance language simple. The DP does secure a landscape strip along the northern and part of the western property line. The second variance is requested is also to section 41, which requires 1 parking island containing 1 tree for every 8 parking stalls. In this case, the planting of trees within the utility corridor is not permitted, and the additional asphalt to curb the planting is not permitted within either the water or the gas statutory right-of-way. Typically, staff seek a higher level of landscaping to screen light industrial activities along Queensway. In this instance, while the parking lot screening falls short of the bylaws requirement, the additional landscaping along Queensway significantly enhances the overall landscaping in the area and results in an overall net gain in landscaping. Staff recommend the approval of both variances. To offset these variances, which come at the request of the district, the applicant has also committed to providing one electric vehicle charging station, which will be secured as a covenant. DP 505 was posted to the district's development showcase. No requests for a public information meeting were received, and no public information meeting was held. No comments have been received since the variance notification was delivered within the legislative requirement. Staff recommend that council authorize development permit number 505, subject to the following conditions, and that the following variances be approved as part of the development permit. Thank you.
Council, are there any questions? Councilor Pettengill?
Thank you. What is the covenant BB 585694? What does that require at this point?
Through the chair, thanks for that question, Councillor Pettengill. The covenant is an old covenant for an old servicing agreement that has been completed. So it's more of a housekeeping requirement than anything.
Okay. And then I thought I recalled in previous discussions that the ADP and our staff were encouraging developers to build to the max height to ensure sort of maximum industrial capacity for a site. But this seems that it's 6 meters or so below what's normally permitted. So I'm curious as to why we weren't pushing for greater heights at this location.
Through the chair, there's no requirement to meet the maximum height. Through a zoning bylaw update, I believe last year we increased the permitted height in the I-11 zone. The applicant had submitted this application, I believe, prior to that change, and they hadn't requested increased height. An increased height may also require increased parking, and on this site, they would be too constrained to provide that.
Okay, that's good for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Nope. I'll go out to members of the public. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak to this development permit? And I will point out that your comments are isolated to the variances only. And there's nobody at Brennan Park, and I see no one. Any further questions? Council, there's a motion in front of you. Anybody like to propose staff recommendation? Councillor Herford, seconded by Mayor Elliott. Further discussion? Councillor Anderson.
Just a brief note, if I may, in the report to council under strategic plan, the economy and local jobs, there's a reference to the employment land strategy. That is, I'll quote, as the individual tenants of each unit are unknown at this time, alignment with the employment land strategy is unknown. Presumably this should be referring to the economic action plan or a component of the action plan. I raise this because last time in the report for the neighboring properties, there was a fuller treatment of the implications for the economic development stuff, but that is, of course, an evolving conversation as implementation plans get set out. But I just noted that there's likely a typo. Instead of employment land strategy, what was referred to as likely economic action plan or emerging sector roadmap and action plan. That's all I had. Thank you.
Any further comment, Council? And I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Fletcher.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is item 9, bylaws, and we have several for first 3 readings. I don't believe there's a presentation on this. Heather is? Oh, Ms. Proctor, you're making the presentation?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead.
Okay. Just waiting for the, okay, I've got the ball now. Excellent. And can you see the presentation now?
Yes.
Great. Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. For the public, my name is Heather Boxrud, Chief Financial Officer, and I'm joined by Alana Schultes, Financial Service Specialist on the line as well. We will be presenting the 2020 Loan Authorization Bylaw request. The goal of this evening's brief presentation is that we're seeking the first 3 readings of the 2020 Loan Authorization Bylaws, which include Bylaw number 2692-2020, number 2774-2020, 2775-2020, 2776-2020, and 2777-2020. Further details of the projects have been provided in the 2020 Loan Authorization Report to Council, which has been included in the agenda package. The legal process for loans incurred by a municipality are governed by the Community Charter. Section 179 and 180 of the Community Charter require long-term borrowing authorization be obtained by bylaw, which requires ministerial review. And following the 3rd reading and the ministerial review, the bylaws are subject to electoral approval, and staff are recommending the alternative approval process method, or AAP. The AAP process takes about 8 to 10 weeks to complete and requires a counter petition process before bylaw adoption and a 30-day quashing period post bylaw adoption before the ministry will provide a certificate of approval. These loan authorization bylaws include capital projects or phases of existing projects which started in 2020. The projects and the respective debt funding were approved in the 2025-year financial plan. The projects requiring debt authorization include Bylaw 2692-2020 at $1.3 million for the landfill, gas capture and flare. The Bylaw 2774-2020, which is $1.1 million for the next phase of the Technology Transformation Project, or TTP project, which includes completing payroll, the development applications and point of sale system, electronic fund transfers, and electronic purchase order system. Bylaw 2775-2020 for $1.2 million is for the phase 2 of the oceanfront development, our 20 Main Peninsula Road. And then Bylaw 2776-2020 for $2.4 million is for the industrial, commercial, institutional, multifamily municipal facilities water meter installation project. And then finally, Bylaw 277-2020 is $10 million for the main fire hall out in Valley Cliff. Just a note on allowable debt servicing limits. Loan authorization bylaws are approved by the Municipal Finance Authority to ensure that the district has capacity to meet debt servicing requirements. MFA requires that debt service limits are not greater than 25%. However, the district's financial plan guidelines state limits no greater than 20%. When inclusive of current debt authorization and issued and upcoming issuance for 2021, the estimated debt servicing limits with these new loan authorizations will be at 11%, leaving 9% before reaching the district's financial plan guidelines limits. And that is all I have for you this evening. I will now open it up to Council for any questions and discussion.
Council, are there any questions? Mary Elliott.
Thank you, Ms. Boxrud. Do you feel like they're coming later in the year than usual? And is that the case?
No, there's only two times of the year that we can go through authorization and issuance, which is the spring and the fall.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions, Council? Councilor Stoner.
Thank you. Just a quick question on the water meter installation component in this.
Volume's a little low, Councilor Stoner.
Is that any better?
Thank you.
There we go. Sorry, this is about the water meter installation component. And in the staff report, it says that there is an existing authorization bylaw that will expire after 5 years, and only less than $1 million of the funds have been issued. I'm just curious if that is a delay in the project delivery, or how does that work?
Yes, that's correct. So basically the authorization went out and it was a multi-phase project the bylaw expires after 5 years. So we had to go back in for another authorization so we can have the money, enough funding for the issuance.
Further questions, Council? Seeing none, there are 5 bylaws to consider. We will consider them separately. Is somebody prepared to move the staff recommendation for bylaw 2692? Moved by Councillor French, second Councillor Pettengill. Any further comment? We'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carries unanimously. The second is for bylaw 2774, Technology Transformation Project. The mover, Councillor Herford, seconded Councillor Anderson. Further comment? We'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Third is for the Peninsula Main Road Capital Works Authorization Bylaw number 2775. Is the mover the recommendation? Councillor Stoner. Seconder, Councillor French. Further comment? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The fourth is the Water Meter Capital Works Loan Authorization Bylaw number 2776. Is there a mover of that recommendation? Councillor Stoner, seconded Councillor Anderson. Further comment? We'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And finally, main fire hall funding, bylaw 2777, moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Herford. Further comment? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Ms. Bockwood.
Thank you.
Next is item 9A6, District of Squamish Park Dedication, Nick Candy Memorial, Woodland, bylaw number 2770. And Ms. Gill, are you presenting in this?
Yes, I am. Just one sec. I'm going to get my screen here. All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Nav Gill from Real Estate Services, and I'm joined by Neil Plum, the Real Estate Manager. So we are here to obtain first 3 readings for a bylaw dedicating land that was donated to the district by the Candy family as park. So the lands are highlighted in red on here, and this is in Brackendale off of Rayburn Road. In spring 2020, the land was donated by the Candy family with the following conditions: that it be preserved as green space and that it be named the Nick Candy Memorial Park. As we were working through this council report, we thought that renaming it to the Nick Candy Memorial Woodland would be a better representation, as it's not really a program park. The OCP designation is Parks, Greenway Corridor, and Recreation for these lands. So it aligns with that, as well as the rezoning. It's residential right now, but planning will look at rezoning to a P zoning, which would be park and recreation use or an ecological zone. And that will be considered at the next zoning update in order to align it with the bylaw change. So there's 2 ways to dedicate park, and this can be done through survey or bylaw. The reason we're proceeding by bylaw in this case is that BC Hydro would not consent to the survey method, as it removes fee simple title, and their right-of-ways would no longer be registered on title. The bylaw is cheaper in that we don't have to do a legal survey, and both methods give us the same rights to administer the park, and as well as the restrictions on removal of park dedication. And I will turn it over to Mayor and Council now for any questions and discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Gill. Council, are there any questions? Councillor Pettengill.
Ms. Gill, you mentioned that, through the chair, that the family requested a particular name and we are recommending another one. Are they okay with the alternate name?
Through the mayor, Councillor Pettingill, yes, sorry, I forgot to mention in my presentation that we ran the name change by them and they agreed that that made more sense, that it makes sense of what the park actually, it's not actually a park, but more like forested area. So they were okay with the change.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions, Council? There is a motion that District of Squamish 2021 permissive tax exemption 1 year Squamish. Wrong one. And forgot. The District of Squamish Park dedication, Nick Candy Memorial Woodland Bylaw number 2770, 2020, be given first 3 readings. Is there a mover of that? Mayor Elliott, seconded Councillor Herford. Further discussion? Councillor Pettingill, Councillor Anderson.
I will be supporting this, and I very much appreciate the donation and the Candy family thinking about our community. But I have to admit, in the context of a lot of the conversations that are happening right now, I do have some discomfort with our approach to naming, especially parcels of land. And I think that is a conversation that we should probably be having, and you know, what sort of naming is appropriate when we are on unceded territories, when we have the opportunity to assign names to land.
Councillor Anderson.
I'm delighted to see this initiative on the part of the Candy family and our collaboration with it. Nick Candy was a go-to volunteer, heavy lifter, and leader in several realms of community affairs over a long period of time. And not least in Brackendale itself, as a developer and a planner, if you like, of neighborhoods that have evolved in that area through land holdings he had and contracting activity, he really has left his mark. And so I'm also glad to see the location and everything seems to fit with the purposes that are being put forward today. And I'm very happy to see this go forward. Thank you.
Councillor French.
Thanks, Chair. Nick Candy was a member of Squamish Council back in the 1970s, maybe even late 60s. I'm thrilled that this family is making the dedication of this land, and that we're recognizing this property in this way. And while I hear Councillor Pettingill loud and clear around concerns with naming, I agree that that's a conversation we need to have. And despite that, this is a fitting dedication. I'll be supporting. Thanks.
Thank you. Some of you have preempted me. As the chair of the meeting and the acting mayor, I wanted to say on behalf of the District of Squamish, I would like to express heartfelt thanks to the Candy family for the donation of this land that will be preserved as woodlands in the name of Mr. Nicholas Candy. Nick Candy came to Squamish in 1949. He worked as a ranger in Garibaldi Park, then worked in the logging industry before establishing Candy Contracting Limited. Through his contracting company, he worked on many Squamish projects, including the Darrell Bay Terminal construction, diking projects, Centennial Field soccer and ball fields, Shannon Falls Park trails, and airport clearing. He developed Bracken Park in the 1970s and co-developed Eagle Run. He was an active member of the Squamish community. He was a 2-term district councillor between 1976 and 1979, and was acting mayor between February and July 1979, following the sudden passing of Mayor Brennan. His titles and volunteer work also included chair of the Squamish Recreation Association, Squamish Flying Club president, May Day Parade Master, Squamish Estuary Study Review Board, Brackendale Farmers Institute President, and the Squamish Hospital Board Director. Mr. Candy passed away in 2007 at age 79, with 9 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren counted amongst his family members. Now the community can join Mr. Candy's extensive family in honoring his legacy through this general land donation, where a memorial plaque will be placed on the site. Seeing nothing further, I will call a question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Council, and thank you, the Candy family.
Thank you.
Moving on now to third reading, item 9B1, District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200-2011, short-term rentals bylaw number 2695-2019. This is for third reading. Councillor Stoner.
I have a question to staff, if that's allowed at this point.
We have to be careful there's no new information provided. You can ask a question on process. Did you have a question on process, Councillor Stoner?
I'll hold it. Thank you.
I'm sorry, we don't hear you.
I said I'll hold it at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Staff recommendation is that District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200-2011 amendment bylaw short-term rentals number 2695-2019 be given third reading. Somebody prepared to move that? Moved by Mayor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Herford. Council, any comment? Mayor Elliott, and then Councillor Anderson. Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. I just want to thank the community for participating in what has been a lengthy process to get to today. We've heard a lot of feedback from all sides of this debate. This is not a perfect bylaw, in my opinion, but it is a start. We have a housing first approach in the District of Squamish, and that means that housing for all is a critical priority. So that weighed heavily in my thinking about this bylaw. I think we've also heard feedback from the community about avoiding the commercialization of our housing stock and arresting the transition of secondary suites into short-term rentals. We've seen the really rapid growth in this use, despite the fact that these suites were meant as long-term rentals. So I think for this reasons, the bylaw is supportable. But this bylaw, I think, misses some of the subtleties that as a tourism economy are important to the District of Squamish. And I think perhaps the option in front of us is too closely aligned with big city thinking and maybe not quite so aligned with other tourism influenced economies like Pemberton or Nelson or Tofino. And so I think had we been at this point last year prior to the pandemic, I may not have had these concerns, but I don't think that we've provided necessarily a bylaw that's nimble enough to respond to the reality we're facing today. So I think I will support third reading at this point, but I will be advocating strongly in the budget next year that we take measures to address and I think free up some of this stock for short-term rentals. I think in places where we have carriage houses and secondary suites on the same lot, that one of those should be allowed into the short-term rental market. I think folks that are living outside district boundaries in more rural settings, it would make sense to have a short-term rental use in that kind of environment. And quite frankly, I think that the size of our community, we could support a few more short-term rentals. So I realize there's a period in which this will begin to take effect, or a grace period for folks that are using their suites as short-term rentals. I think during that time, we should be budgeting for some additional look at this to respond to the reality that we're facing today. So I will be supporting this motion, but I will also be a strong advocate in budget for already revising it going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Anderson, then Councillor Stoner, Councillor Pettengill, and Councillor French.
Thank you. We've received quite a number of correspondence and presenters during our public hearing a couple of weeks ago. The quality of information and testimonials provided have been very impressive. I've read most of the letters 3 times, and I have no doubt that my colleagues have as well. My reason for supporting what we've referred to as option C is not that I expect there will be a strong number of conversions to long-term rentals from these units that are involved. And it is also not with the expectation of a substantial number of new short-term rental inventory. This may also be limited. My key concern and observation surrounds impact on neighborhoods. And I have direct observation on this. Yes, the impacts will vary from neighborhood to neighborhood and from property to property, but it is a factor and certainly has been from my point of view. Mainly, however, I believe we need a regulatory platform and we need a precautionary approach to implementation. We have heard some interesting ideas from our correspondents. Several ideas have come forward and proposals, but I think that we need the platform first, and then we can come back and perhaps have a look at some of them. We are, to quote the planning department, moving from prohibition to regulation. We're uncertain about some aspects of what impacts to expect, and positive and negative, for affordable housing, local economy, and neighborhoods. But we also, when I reflect on the timing of what we're doing here, it is during our current period of depressed demand from the tourism sector, and I hope, and I'm crossing my fingers, that this will also be or represent a favorable time, a more favorable time for implementing our precautionary approach with relatively less collateral damage to homeowner interests. I do hope so. In the end, though, I am, as with Mayor Elliott, I am concerned that we must be watching this closely ongoing, close monitoring, learning and adjusting as we go. And with that, I will be supporting the resolution as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Stoner, followed by Councillor Rattenbill, French, Herford, and myself.
Thank
Go ahead,
you.
Councillor Stoner.
Through the chair, can you hear me all right now? Is that better? Still need to be louder. All right. So I appreciate staff's work to get us here and the amount of community feedback that we've received through this process and engagement along the way. It's been a long road. Looking back to the original staff report on this, predating this council. And I think that reiterates the fact that there's really no easy answer here. It's not a black and white solution, and we continue to try and find our way through the variable options and impacts and positive impacts that this sort of regulation might have. I would say that in these discussions to date, I have long been a proponent of the housing first lens. And in an increasingly unaffordable market, we need to do all that we can to protect the variety of housing forms that allow for all of our community members to have somewhere to live and to call home across the housing continuum. I do have great fear that without regulation, we risk further commodifying our housing market. And if we enable the commercialization of our housing stock and neighborhoods through STRs, then we really risk losing a core part of our community as well, especially our workers, our workforce through housing. I do hear from a number of folks that those who are operating short-term rentals now will not convert their suites to long-term rentals, and I think that that's okay. To me, this is more so about protecting future conversion of our housing stock, and what I call the conversion rate to STRs suggests that we are really losing our housing stock to the STR market, with listings going from about 250 in 2016 to 500, or well over 500 today. Although with all that said, and knowing the impacts that, although difficult to quantify in the data that we currently have and piece apart the challenges of housing market data more broadly, I do think that this is one important step that we need to be taking in order to protect that housing stock. For that reason, I am going to be supportive of this bylaw that's in front of us, but similar to my previous council colleagues' comments, I don't think that we've necessarily hit the mark with this particular bylaw as it stands. And I think that it's lacking in flexibility and nimbleness that we've heard from our community, be it the tourism Squamish, the chamber, STR operators themselves, tourism businesses, and the community more broadly, that they were looking for regulation, but also flexibility that enabled and supported more of our tourism economy. And so with that, I just want to flag with council and with staff that if there is support for this motion, that I would like to follow up with a subsequent motion for council consideration that would direct staff to bring back options for a business licensing system that would allow for a limited number of STRs in secondary suites and carriage homes, along with what will be allowed in principal residences. But that can be for consideration after this particular bylaw is voted on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Stoner. Councilor Pettengill, followed by Councilor French, Councilor Herford, and myself.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. At this point, I'm not prepared to support the bylaw. Touch on a few things I've talked about before, but I see short-term rentals as a critical and desirable component of our tourism industry. And in particular, I see it as in many ways preferable to traditional hotels, because when it's local ownership, it's all of the money staying within the community rather than a significant portion of it going out of the community to a multinational hotel chain that often has low-wage workers, which create a housing challenge in and of themselves. One of the other things that stuck out for me during the public hearing and the correspondence we got leading to that was thinking about STRs, not as an STR first, but as a home-based business first. And, you know, how do I feel about home-based businesses in general? And I think for me, in terms of our climate crisis and livability and walkable towns, getting people out of cars and not dependent on cars, I think home-based businesses are absolutely critical. I think they're a key enabler of an innovative tech and green tech sector, rec tech sector. And so from that perspective, I think short-term rentals fit very well as one type of home-based business that I would like to see supported. And I think for me, the important distinguishing factor in a home-based business, whether it's short-term rental or otherwise, is that the owner, operator, proprietor lives full-time at the site. So to be clear, I don't support the idea of people having a second vacation home here and renting it out most of the time, or having 3 homes and STRing a bunch of them. I think if it's your primary residence and that's where you live and there is a business, be it short-term rental or otherwise, I think that is something that we should support for many, many reasons and things we're trying to achieve in our strategic plan. You know, I think that requirement for it to be truly a home-based business will help manage the amount of stock that gets used for this purpose. And I think I would balance the remainder with, you know, total number of business licenses and things, you know, approaches like that. I also, you know, I think it's really important that our employment is matched to residences. And so I think that's sort of built in when you have a home-based business, that employment is built right into the residence. And so I think that is a really positive pairing in my mind. What else? I appreciate my colleagues' willingness to take a second look at this and improve it. But I think, you know, given where our tourism sector is right now, a well-run home-based STR is not something you can flip on or off overnight. And if we go down the road of shutting these down, I think many people will flip them into home-based businesses, legitimate or not. And so I don't think we'll see the long-term rental return, and I think we will lose some of the most desirable STRs that we have. So I hope whatever approach we take as the next step is one that can somehow preserve some of the STRs that we do have. And I want to be clear, this is not an attempt to be dismissive of housing first policies or the long-term rental situation. I think those are both serious issues. I just don't think our current approach with short-term rentals is a good solution to that. And one final thing I want to call out, there were a few emails and it wasn't the majority, but I did want to address them, which were to the effect of, you know, I'm a homeowner, it's not my problem if there's a long-term rental problem. That's council's problem, and it's my property. I should be able to do what I want with that. And I just think when you move to a community, you, for better or for worse, become responsible for some of the community's problems as well. I mean, as a community, we are responsible for the problems of our community, and so this is the long-term rental shortage is a community challenge. And we may not agree on the solutions, but it is something that we all do have responsibility for. I thank staff for the efforts. This has been a long discussion, and my preference would be that we do a little more work. We have not enabled short-term rentals yet, so I think we do have the window to keep doing a bit of work, and it would be my preference that we do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor French, followed by Councillor Herbert and myself.
Thank you, Chair. Excellent work has been done to craft this policy, and quality feedback has been received. I'm impressed by the research that was done by more than a few local residents who wanted to speak up and express their concerns through this process. Thank you to the district staff members who have worked diligently on the file, and also those passionate residents who gave us feedback on the work. In determining how I would vote on this policy in front of us tonight, I gave the Squamish Chamber of Commerce and the Tourism Squamish submissions deep consideration. One of the things, though, that concerns me most through this process is the feeling of entitlement that I've heard from some residents who have been operating non-conforming businesses in their homes. Some believe it's time for council to conform to their wishes by legitimizing their non-conforming business. For those who want an income stream from extra space in their homes or on their properties, it's time to follow the rules. And while the pandemic has hit the whole world hard, there will eventually be a time when hotels operate at much higher occupancy levels than what we see now, and our visitor levels will go up when the world can come back to us. I also expect our legitimate short-term rental operators will do well. Visitors to Squamish will find legitimate places to stay during their time here. And I agree, this bylaw isn't perfect. And I also look forward to finding ways to work out the inflexibilities that can be made more flexible once we determine where and how we can do that. And the people who I think are going to benefit most from the move I expect we're going to make tonight is the hardworking folks in minimum wage jobs who find it difficult to find and keep secure housing. I'll be voting in favor of third reading.
Thank you, Councillor French. Councillor Herbert.
Thank you. I appreciate all the work done by staff on this, and to all the residents that expressed their points of view throughout the process. The housing first concept ranks very high with me, and to me this regulation isn't necessarily about returning the existing short-term rentals to long-term. It is about protecting the inventory that we currently have as long-term rentals. As both a renter and an employer, I've experienced the challenges associated with the rental market in Squamish, and I think it's a responsible thing to do to move to regulating this usage. So I'm happy we're moving from prohibition to regulation, and I look forward to adding this usage in a regulated way to our neighborhoods. I don't think there is a perfect bylaw in any regard. I challenge someone to show me a perfect bylaw. And this one is no different. I do think that we have more work to do now that we're moving into this regulation phase as to what those additional layers could be. I look forward to doing that work. And as Mayor Elliott mentioned in her remarks, these are things that are done and projects that are considered around at budget time. And I look forward to weighing those competing priorities at that time. There is more work to be done on this. This is the regulation and we're done. But given that this was a piece of work that was outlined in the OCP, which was adopted in 2018, which took quite some time the OCP took quite some time to be written and then adopted, and this regulation is going to come into effect essentially in 2021. I think it would be irresponsible not to support this action at this time, and I do acknowledge there's more work to do down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Herford. Thank you. For my part, I remember during the last election campaign speaking at an all candidates meeting about this topic. And at that time, we just had a presentation before council, and there was something like 420 listings. And now, as I think as Councillor Stoner stated, there's over 500 listings. It became an issue that I just don't think we could ignore. It's resulted in a lot of staff work. Council gave direction to staff to look into this issue, to come up with some solutions and some options for us, and that's what they've done. This particular option, I think, was even characterized by staff as a cautious first step in this process. We can see from experience how it works. We can draw on the experiences of other municipalities, and certainly it's open going forward to look for other solutions or more relaxation in certain areas. It is, I think, somewhat unfortunate that this position, this for me is a housing issue, and this has somehow run diametrically opposed by the tourism industry, the chamber and so forth. And I can understand their concerns, but I think, and others have stated it, that it is a housing first issue. The housing task force we had last term made it one of their strongest recommendations was to control the short-term rental use of rental properties. And as I say, it's just something we could not avoid and could not ignore. It is also for me, as Councillor Anderson pointed out, there is an impact on neighborhoods issue. It's a commercial activity in a residential area. Our neighborhoods were not necessarily designed for that. Creates more traffic, parking issues, etc. It also brings a lot more people into the neighborhood on a recurring basis, and occasionally even noise and other issues that require intervention. So I think that's something also we cannot ignore and have to take a stab at regulating. I will be supporting this on those bases. I'm not going to repeat the comments of my other fellow councillors, most of which I agree with. So I'll stop there. Anything further, council? I will call a question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Pettengill opposes. The motion carries. Thank you. Council, that brings us to
Chair.
9C.
Chair.
Sorry. Oh, Councillor Stoner, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair, I would like to test a subsequent motion with council, and if it gets seconded, I'll speak to it. But the motion that I'm going to propose is that prior to enforcement of the STR bylaw, staff bring back options for a business licensing system that would allow for a limited number of STRs in secondary suites and carriage homes, along with those allowed in primary residence as per the STR bylaw.
You seconding, Mayor Elliott?
Yes, I'll second that for discussion.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. I want to put this forward because I do think that it is important that we keep this on the radar, that staff continue to work on this issue in terms of trying to continue to advance the bylaw that we just passed. I have, in my previous comments on this topic, always talked about a pathway to legalization for STRs that really wanted to operate a business. And I think we heard in the public hearing that there are folks who are really keen to do that and are happy to operate on a level playing field if they're given the route with which they have to follow. And so I am putting forward this motion in an effort to ensure that that pathway is available for those who may want to follow it in a limited and regulated way. So exactly what that looks like, I recognize that's adding additional work to staff's plate at this point, but I think it can be a really important piece to put hand in hand with the policy that we just passed.
Thank you. Mayor Elliott, Councillor French. You're muted, Mayor Elliott.
Can I get you to read your motion again?
Go ahead, Councillor
Yeah,
Stoner.
it currently reads as that prior to enforcement of the STR bylaw, staff bring back options for a business licensing system that would allow for a limited number of STRs in secondary suites and carriage homes, along with those allowed in the primary residences as per the STR bylaw.
Yep. And Councillor Stoner, could you send that to staff, just so we have it correctly?
Who's our
It's a little
minute
hard to
taker?
hear. Beg your pardon?
Who's our minute taker?
Ms. Pollock.
Thank you.
Thank you for reading that again. In my comments at third reading, I said that I would be a strong advocate for seeing some of the 2021 budget put towards this issue, so that it doesn't get dropped. So I'm supportive of this motion. I think, when I look at other communities that are using numbers or density of short-term rentals or limiting the number of business licenses available, I think there is likely some subtlety we can introduce prior to enforcement that will allow us to see some well-run STRs in the community, but still not see that wholesale transformation of secondary suites into this use. So I'd be keen to see this move forward.
Thank you. Councillor Pettengill. Oh, I beg your pardon. Councillor French, Councillor Pettengill.
Thanks. Yeah. As I said in my remarks, I support the idea of some flexibility coming at the back end of this. And one of the reasons that I feel that way is because there are definitely some gray area short-term rental operators in our community who are doing a very good job. And when I say that, what I mean is their customers are happy, their neighbors are either not impacted, or if they are impacted, it's in a positive way. And there is definitely a demand for the type of family-oriented, kitchen facility-oriented short-term rental options that are available in Squamish right now that could potentially face potential closure. So I support this flexibility. I support the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Pettengill, then I'll put myself on the list. Councillor Herford.
Thank you, Chair, and I will be supporting this. I think I am eager to see, and I will be speaking to it when we come to our zoning bylaws, updates, some of those other things too. I think it is really important that we facilitate home-based businesses in our residential neighborhoods. I think given our various livability and climate goals, it's really important to avoid residential, industrial, and commercial islands where you have to get into a vehicle to get to work or get to services. And so not every business is appropriate in every residence, and we do want to, I think, constrain total limits. But I think we do need to start looking at this if we're serious about some of the other challenges we're facing. And so I see this as a good opportunity to start working out some of that balance without losing, hopefully, what I see some of the most beneficial operators we have.
Thank you. I'm not going to support this motion, although I generally agree, I think, with where it's headed. I would prefer to give this bylaw that we've just passed third reading of a chance to be implemented. And I think it takes a little bit of study. There are nuances. There's all kinds of different thoughts and solutions about the business licensing program, the number of units per neighborhood. There's what are the neighborhoods, etc. There's a lot of different facets to this. And I would prefer to approach it just a little bit slower rather than just plunge right in at this time. So we'll not be supporting. Councillor Herford, then Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. I appreciate the intent, and I generally agree with the intent of, as I mentioned in my earlier comments on the bylaw we just gave third reading to figure out a way to further refine and the policy and potentially open it up to meet the needs of the community. But I feel like we're these two motions in the same night and tying them together with the timeline of before enforcement. We're not going to have that input as to what the effect is. And to me, the scope of work involved in actually rolling out a program that we could endorse takes a tremendous amount of staff time. There's and budget competing priorities. So I think this is a discussion around, I could see a discussion around scoping out what that work is and what the timelines would be. To me, I see this potentially having the impact of yet another year without an STR regulation. And that's not something that I'm willing to endorse at this time. I would be happy to understand the scope of that work and the budget implications and the time implications before I was to commit to that timeline. So I will not be supporting this motion for those reasons.
Thank you. And before I go to the next speaker, Mr. Buxton, we are in debate, but if there's something you want to clarify, go ahead.
Yeah, and I sort of I hesitate to wade in at this point on the discussion, but the motion as we understand it at present seems to be requiring that we amend we believe that to achieve the stated intent, we're going to have to amend the bylaw we just passed. So I just want council to have that. That's our understanding of the motion on the table. To achieve that, we would need to amend the bylaw we just passed.
Thank you. Mr. Belanishkas, are you in the same point? You're muted.
Thank you. Just a bit more detail in terms of what is in the bylaws already. So the business license bylaw and the fees bylaw already has allowed for, so if, for some short-term rental in secondary suites or non-principal residences, we have a special fee for it. There's nothing to preclude people from coming in applying for a temporary use permit, which will give them temporary ability to operate, or a rezoning. And I think that we've already committed to reevaluating the issue in 2021 next year as we're implementing the regulations, but the motion, as we understand it, would not allow us to start that implementation likely in 2021.
Okay, thank you. We are in debate, so I can't really go farther into that. Councillor Anderson, you haven't spoken yet.
Thank you. I will not be supporting the motion. I am sympathetic to Councillor Stoner's what I take to be her sympathetic administration approach in this period of transition that we're going to have. Some of the suggestions we have received suggestions along this line of licensing and different forms of managing inventory, capping, looking at neighborhood units. I have said already that I think we need the framework implemented first, and some of them may be very interesting to pursue, but I think it's premature. And I think I'm also concerned, as with Councillor Herford, of the staff time that would be involved if we were to pursue this. There's enough work already in the work already outlined to be prepared for our next look at this next year in 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councillor Herford, Mayor Elliott.
Thank you. Actually, I'm gonna forgo my time right now. I'll hold.
Okay. Mayor Elliott, Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. The reason this makes sense to me is because this bylaw was written prior to the impacts of the pandemic and the need to continually help our tourism economy to recover in the years ahead. And I am very afraid of this idea that we can regulate this industry through rezonings and TUPs. We will have the risk there of absolutely drowning in and taking up staff time with that versus finding a simplified way through business licensing to allow for a few more. So while the current bylaw does allow a pathway to legitimization, it is cumbersome. It doesn't regulate the where or the density. And so I don't think it's nimble enough to do what we want to do in response to the current crisis that our tourism industry is in. So I think that is a reason to support this motion going forward.
Councillor Stoner.
Thank you through the chair, and I was just going to say something similar to the mayor on that point.
Speak a little louder.
I will try my best. I'm yelling on this side. I'll have to find myself a new headset for our next meeting. But I did bring this forward, recognizing that is perhaps not ideal relative to the motion we just passed with regards to the previous bylaw. But I do think that the bylaw was drafted in times that are not during the global pandemic, that our tourism economy is challenged at this time. And we are seeing that short-term rentals are providing a viable alternative that is safe for many folks to come and visit our community. I am too extremely hesitant based on the number of conversations I had with folks prior to the public hearing, interested in what the alternative to legalization was for them if they wanted to pursue a temporary use permit or rezoning. And I do have great concern that that will overwhelm our staff because we're trying to implement both a new bylaw and the business licensing process in addition to number of TUPs that I expect will be forthcoming. And so this is why I'm putting this forward because I don't think that that zoning process is actually an ideal scenario that will end up in early 2021.
Further comment, Council? Councillor Herford.
Thank you. Using the housing first mindset, I'm having a hard time delaying the positives of the regulation we just passed by an additional calendar year at best. And our renters and our businesses that do have service level jobs, and these people need places to live, and they need help and downward pressure on the pricing. Probably pre-2018 when the OCP was adopted. So now I think that essentially defeating this motion I see is defeating the bylaw that we just voted to support. And I think I do think that the work is important, and there is room, potentially room for a way to open this up, but further delay I think is just unacceptable to me.
Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Anderson, Councillor Herford, and myself opposed. Motion carries. So moving on, Council, we are at sub C, adoption, and there are 4 bylaws for adoption. The 4th I'm in conflict in. I'll get to that in a minute. So dealing with the first, permissive tax exemption 1 year, bylaw 2772, and the recommendation from staff is that it be adopted. Is there a mover of that recommendation? Moved by Councillor French, second by Mayor Elliott. Any comments? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Second is permissive tax exemption 5-year, bylaw 2773. And the recommendation is that the District of Squamish 2021 permissive tax exemption 5-year, bylaw number 2773, 2020 be adopted. Is there a mover of that? Councillor Stoner, seconder. Mayor Elliott. Further comment? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Third is District of Squamish 2021 permissive tax exemption 2-year, bylaw number 2780, 2020. Staff recommendation is that the District of Squamish 2021 permissive tax exemption 2-year, bylaw number 2780, 2020 be adopted. Is there a mover of that recommendation? Councillor Pettengill moves. Councillor Herford seconds. Further comment? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The 4th is with respect to the District of Squamish 2021 permissive tax exemption for 1 year, the Squamish Valley Golf and Country Club. I have previously, and again, am declaring a conflict. I'm a member of the Squash Club, which is part of that tax-paying entity. Councillor Anderson.
Chair, I will also be declaring a conflict as I'm a member of an affiliated club, affiliated to the golf club.
Thank you. So I'll ask Mayor Elliott to take the chair for this item, and I will step out of the room. Councillor Anderson, I think you have to leave the meeting, and staff will give you a call when you can come back. Thank you.
Staff at City Hall are just going to need to let me know when Councillor Race has exited the room.
He's gone.
All right, so the motion is that, or the staff recommendation is that the District of Squamish 2021 permissive tax exemption 1 year for the Squamish Valley Golf and Country Club, bylaw number 2784, 2020 be adopted. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Herford. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. If we can get both councillors back in the room, please.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Staff are just calling Councillor Anderson. Just stay where you are. We'll just take a short pause until he returns to the meeting.
Chair, are you expecting to have a short recess at any time?
We could do it right now if you like. Do you want a 10-minute recess? Okay, we will come back at 7:35.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll call this meeting back to order. We are on 10A, Corporate Services. And the first item is cancellation of regular business meetings, and the staff recommendation is that the November 3rd, 2020 and November 17th, 2020 regular business meetings be canceled and that special business meetings be scheduled as required in November. Is there a mover of that motion recommendation? Mayor Elliott moves, Councillor French seconds. Any comment? Call the question, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Second is under the heading of community planning and infrastructure. First item, Manquam Wastewater Treatment Plant Pump and Valve Replacement RFP Award. And I believe that's Mr. Kinoshenko.
Chair, do you mean to have your video off?
Oh, beg your pardon. Yeah, there we are. How's that? There I am. It's like the mute button, you know, you got to press it. Mr. Kinoshenko, are you there? There you are.
I'm here.
I'm
just figuring out the technology. Bear with me.
Oh yeah. Good luck with that.
All right.
Nope.
Did everybody see my screen?
No, go back to duplicate screen.
Uh-oh. Duplicate screen.
Go back to your presentation. Start your presentation.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, there you go. Don't touch it. Don't touch anything. Don't touch anything. You're good. You can't do show presenter view when you're doing this.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Ben Kinoshenko. I'm the Technical Operations Manager in the District Public Works Department, and I'm here tonight to hopefully award a couple of contracts for some work we want to do this year. The first one is at the Manquam Wastewater Treatment Plant. It's a pump and valve replacement RFP that we put out this year. And before we get to the award, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about asset management. I know the topic comes up regularly, and we've been in the district, I believe, practicing purposeful asset management since about 2010, when the original asset management plan was completed. The water system and the sewer collection system have seen a lot of input in this regard, but the wastewater treatment plant is kind of the next one for us in Public Works. So in 2018, with help from the engineering department, we started an asset management planning process for the wastewater treatment plant. In 2018, 2019, we were successful in securing some capital replacement funding through that budget year. And what that funding does is it provides us with the ongoing ability to proactively replace equipment and upgrade things as well. So some of the benefits of equipment upgrade, including reduced failure and downtime, improved levels of service to the community, less frustration for our operators as well, and increased time for preventative maintenance tasks. And we also reduce the risk of exceeding our operating permit via either water quality or quantity exceedances, spills, and staff injury as a result of equipment failure. As you may know, the district participates in the National Water and Wastewater Benchmarking Initiative, and I've just got a few charts from that kind of relate to asset management and this project. So looking at this graph of capital reinvestment per the value of replacement, As it relates to the water distribution system, you can see Squamish's results for the last 6 years in the gray columns. And then you've got a purple bar, or purple line, green line, and a orange line, one being the 20th percentile, the median, and the 75th percentile of the benchmarking group, which comprises about 45 municipalities across Canada. So it's a real nice slice of Canadian water and wastewater and stormwater utilities, for that matter. And so what you can see here is that since 2014 and even before, we've consistently been investing more than 75% of the participants in replacement of our water system. One note is that the 2019 data is still in draft, so it may not be perfect quite yet on these graphs. Which leads me to the result of this investment in our infrastructure. You could see kind of from the year 2015 on, a measurable reduction in our number of service connection repairs per number of service connections in the district. So we've gone kind of from the median to below the 25th percentile, so market improvement there. Also, when it comes to water main breaks, we started well above the median in 2014, and we've consistently and somewhat slowly dropped to below the median of the group, which is, again, another, it's the fruit of investing in our infrastructure. And the real beauty of this is that it does impact the end user. So this is our number of customer days in the water system without service. So you can see in 2014, we were above the median, and we've been able to drop that off to near zero disruptions in water service for district utility customers. We've been investing in infrastructure replacement in the collection system as well, although albeit not for as many years. But even so, through the district's inflow and infiltration program, CCTV and flushing and repair work in the sewer collection system, you can see that connections with sanitary flooding have been reduced from above the 75th percentile, and we're getting down near the median, which is great if you don't want sewage in your basement. And one of the other benefits of that I&I program that I mentioned is that we're actually seeing the ratio of our peak wet weather flow at the wastewater treatment plant to dry wet weather flow drop off. So that's another win for our I&I program, and it really shows that investing in these programs and in our infrastructure does have a payoff at the end of the day. So back to the 2020 replacement plan for the plant and the RFP that we're going to award tonight, hopefully. Deliverable number one is we're looking at replacing our thick and waste activated sludge pumps at the plant. These are a peristaltic style pump that kind of have ongoing issues. There's actually a tube in the pump itself that gets compressed by a set of rollers to pump the sludge from a holding tank into our dewatering centrifuges. And that tends to wear out, and they're really expensive to replace. That's been an ongoing issue we've had with them. So we're looking forward to a more robust pump that can actually increase our throughput to the centrifuges and reduce our runtime and therefore our electricity consumption. Deliverables 2 and 3 are replacement of 3 pumps that are at end of life on our old side primary clarifier. And the last one is replacement of some check valves and knife gate valves on our wastewater outfall line. Through the RFP process, we placed documents on BC Bid and the district website. We received 3 responses. They were evaluated on the basis of experience and qualifications, specifications, construction and installation plan, and overall price. Combustion Solutions Incorporated, who we would like to contract to do this work was the lowest of the lowest price of the proponents, but also the highest scored, and they are a local Squamish business. So the resolutions I would like to make council are that the District of Squamish award an agreement to supply and install replacement pumps and valves at the Manpower Wastewater Treatment Plant to Combustion Solutions Incorporated, and that the mayor and corporate officer, be authorized to execute the appropriate agreement and contract documents.
Thank you. Council, any questions? No questions. The resolutions are on the screen. Councillor Pettengill, are you moving them? Is there a seconder? Councillor Herford, any comment? Councillor Pettengill.
Just wanted to say that it's really cool to see in objective terms, that our investments, the positive difference they're having. And so those charts and that information is fantastic. So thank you.
Thank you. I have Mayor Elliott and Councillor French.
Just kudos to Mr. Kanashenko for slipping in an update on our benchmarking. Even when we're doing an award tonight for a contract, I think it's really helpful to understand the context. And our agendas are busy, so it's often hard to fit some of those updates in. So I appreciate you bringing that to us tonight, and it's nice to see this going to a local company.
Thank you. Councillor French.
Thanks. I too wanted to point out that this contract is going to a local company. It's going to be that well-paid employees at Combustion Solutions will be focused on work in their community. This is very much in line with our core objectives. And replacing these pumps and valves, it's important. When we flush our toilets, we want to know that it's going to work and that our basements aren't going to get flooded, because it's costly and it's really unpleasant. So thanks for the good work, staff.
Thank you. Further comment? Seeing nothing, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Kanashenko. And you have the next one, Freightliner single axle dump truck.
Yes. Okay, is that up on screen?
It is.
Excellent. Thank you. And so the first off, thank you all for your kind comments. I appreciate it. And secondly, we would like to also award a contract to replace one of our single axle dump trucks in Public Works. But before we get to that, I got more data for you, or hopefully more useful information. So as I mentioned in the report, in around 2010, so it was 2010, same year as the asset management plan, a fleet and equipment replacement master plan was created for the district. The table on screen is an excerpt from that plan, and it just lays out the recommended life cycle for the district's fleet vehicles, which number more than, I think, 95 rolling stock. And then we have a small equipment as well. And so through the last, the first 6-7 years of the plan, the Public Works Department realized that it was possible to extend the useful life of some of the vehicles without really hindering the performance or losing on the back end when we dispose of the vehicles. So on the right are the fleet replacement numbers that we currently use and that our financial plan is structured around. And you'll notice for the heavy duty trucks, we're at a 15-year cycle as was recommended by the equipment or the fleet and equipment replacement plan. the chart you now have on screen is basically the 40-year capital replacement spending plan. So all of the vehicles are in a spreadsheet and they're spread out over a number of years. In 2016, when the Director of Public Works reviewed that capital investment plan, he kind of shuffled things around a little bit to try and make the curve a bit smoother so that we were having a consistent investment amount. The average investment over the 40-year term, 30-year term, is just over $600,000. I think it's $627,000 per year. But there are some blips in there. So heavy equipment and heavy truck replacement years, we spend a little bit above the average. And then when it comes time to replace fire trucks and fire apparatus, those are the years when we really see the spikes just due to the high cost of that equipment. This chart is from our 3 heavy-duty trucks we currently have. So 9426 in green, 9432, which is a tandem axle truck, so 2 axles instead of 1 in red. And then one of the newer single axles, 9443 in, I guess that's beige. And this graph is interesting because it really shows how the cost of ownership of a vehicle, especially a heavy piece of equipment, increases over the lifespan. And kind of that's a bit of that justification for replacing vehicles in a timely manner. So you get the value out of them, but you don't have to spend as much in operations and maintenance as you would when they really start to age. You'll notice 2016 and 2017 were bad years for a couple of the vehicles. This was related to emission control system issues, and I believe 2017 was a particularly nasty winter for snow and ice control. And then that does impact our O&M costs significantly. This is a photo of the truck that's outgoing, 9426, single axle dump. An example of what the new one will look like, less one set of axles and the hook lift apparatus. And one item we are looking to add to the equipment that comes with this vehicle is a pre-wet tank. So what this does is it contains salt brine, and as granular salt is spread onto the road, it pre-wets that salt. So whereas dry salt would bounce and a lot of it would end up off the road in the ditch, the pre-wetted salt sticks to the road and activates quicker. So we end up using less salt, and the de-icing properties of the salt is activated faster, therefore removing the ice from the roads quicker. So the resolutions before council tonight are that the District of Squamish award an agreement to supply a new single axle dump truck to Harbor International Trucks Limited, and that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute the appropriate agreement and contract documents to begin the vehicle build.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Council Pettengill.
So looking at the report, it looks like we sort of plan around a 15-year life cycle for a vehicle like this. But I'm seeing with battery technologies and hydrogen technology and so on advancing quickly, and the climate crisis and so on, there seems to be some thought that a sudden switch to electric or alternative fuel sources may be quite sudden and sooner than we think. And so aside from the climate opportunity, I believe there's a feeling that the value of internal combustion engines will drop very suddenly as well, throwing asset plans out of whack. So is that something we're looking at and thinking about, going to shorter term leases or something over the next while to protect us from that? Or are we for the foreseeable future still planning on longer life cycle purchases?
Through the chair. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair, we haven't specifically looked at leasing. Generally, for our purposes, It's more cost effective to own. And I'm off the top of my mind, I'm not sure if there's anything in the fleet and equipment replacement plan that speaks to that. From the research we've done through the West Coast Electric Fleets Initiative and the Fraser Basin Council's, oh boy, can't remember what, basically they have an electric vehicle group as well that we've taken part of in the past, is that generally the alternative fuel technologies are coming quickly for the small and medium duty vehicles. There are some infancy technologies out there for heavy duty trucks. To my knowledge, none of it's available in Canada yet, and a lot of the stuff in North America is getting snapped up by California, Oregon, and Washington, as they have a large zero emissions fleet initiative that basically funnels all of the new zero emission vehicles to them, and we can't even, like, if we wanted an electric or an alternative fuel heavy duty vehicle, we couldn't get one. But it's a very good point, and I believe one that's been made before, so I can bring it up with our staff for review if you'd like.
Thank you. Further comment? Seeing none, there was a recommended motion. Is somebody prepared to move that? Moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Herford. Further comment? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Konashenko.
Thank you.
And Mr. Rolston, I see you there. Somewhere there you are. Moved around. You are on the next item, B sub 3, grant support wastewater treatment plant blower replacement. The floor is yours.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is David Rolston. I'm the Manager of Municipal Infrastructure with the district. I have a slightly less educational presentation tonight than Mr. Konashenko, I regret to inform you. I am seeking council support to submit a grant application for the wastewater treatment plant blower replacement. So some quick background, there is a second intake under the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Rural and Northern Communities Grant Program that can provide up to 90% of project costs. Staff have reviewed the grant objectives, which includes energy efficiency and increased capacity to treat wastewater, as well as the district's capital projects list. And we've concluded that the wastewater treatment plant blower replacement project best met the grant objectives and would also alleviate financial pressure on the sewer utility, which has some very large capital expenditures coming up in the next 5 years with a major capacity upgrade. The blowers at the wastewater treatment plant are 45 years old and are the largest energy consumer at the treatment plant. The district completed an energy efficiency study, which was funded by BC Hydro, that identified blower replacement as the best energy conservation measure, and it would also fulfill an important need to replace an aging asset. Following that study, the district completed a pre-design study that recommends replacing the blowers in a new building that will meet seismic and flood protection requirements at an estimated cost of $1.75 million. In order to apply for this grant, the district needs to commit to a 10% share of project costs, which is $175,000. And the district already has $500,000 approved in the current financial plan for the wastewater treatment plant blower replacement. And so applying for this grant would not commit the district to any additional funding requirements beyond what has already been approved by council. And so the recommendations are that the District of Squamish submit an application for grant funding for wastewater treatment plant blower replacement through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Rural and Northern Communities, and that council supports the project and commits its share, $175,100 of the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Council Pettengill.
I just looked at the grant quickly, and I really like this proposal. I'm wondering if there's a reason why we didn't try and include some energy generation as a piece of this project. It seemed that might even strengthen the grant and wouldn't anticipate it would necessarily supply all of the energy. It might further offset some of our future energy costs. I'm just wondering if that's something we looked at or were able to consider.
Through the chair, we have evaluated energy generation at the plant in the past. One of the main ways that that's done in wastewater treatment plants is through anaerobic digestion, which produces gas, which can be burned and creates energy that way. We don't currently have anaerobic digesters. That may be a future addition, in which case energy generation could be a potential option without incurring a significant additional major investment at this point. Energy generation hasn't really been considered. So we're basically trying to fulfill a key asset management as well as an energy reduction with this project. It's something that's within our plans to do as part of our wastewater treatment plant asset management plan, and also supports our forthcoming capacity upgrade. So this project meets a number of different needs, which is why we selected that.
Okay. Further comment? The recommended motion is the District of Squamish submit an application for grant funding application for wastewater treatment plant blower replacement through the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Rural and Northern Communities, and that Council supports the project and commits to its share $175,100 of the project. Is there a mover of that recommendation? Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Stoner. Any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Olson.
Thank you.
We are now on to item 4, grant support for Sea Sky electric vehicle network expansion. And are you there, Mr.? There you are, Mr. Piggott.
Good evening, everyone. Excellent. Here, I'll just share my screen here quickly. Are you able to see my presentation slides?
Not yet.
How about now?
Nope.
I'll try once more. They're not necessary.
Yeah, now it's starting to come up.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much. My name... Sorry, Councillor Rice?
No, go ahead. Yep.
Okay. Thanks. My name is Ian Pickett. I'm the Manager of Sustainability and Climate Change here at the District of Squamish, and I'm presenting tonight for grant support for the Sea to Sky electric vehicle network expansion. In the interest of time, I'm going to keep my presentation very short. I'm happy to answer questions if there are any afterward. So this funding covers 73.3% of eligible project costs from the federal and provincial governments. The District of Squamish contribution is $214,000 over 8 years. So the main outputs of the project are first, upgrade of electricity grid componentry. What's really important to note is that this enables it to be cheaper and easier to install further electric infrastructure. It also includes the installation of 5 level 3 or fast chargers and 8 dual port level 2 chargers. This project will help achieve many district goals. One of note is the Community Climate Action Plan. Big Move 3, the goal is for 50% of our vehicles to be low carbon by 2050. This is very significant as over 50% of our emissions are currently from vehicle travel. It also contributes to larger greenhouse gas reductions regionally. It enables broader use and ownership of electric vehicles in Whistler and Vancouver and beyond. As you were made aware, the original resolution has been changed somewhat due to due to feedback from the funders. So I will now put the updated resolution up on the screen. I won't pain you all by reading through it. I'll just leave it here for for a minute, though. Chapter 3 is particularly interesting. And with that, I will welcome any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Pickett. Council, are there any questions? Councillor Anderson, Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. I have two questions. First of all, there is a proposal our aim is to enable the construction of 5 level 3 chargers, fast chargers, and 8 dual port level 2 chargers. I wonder if you could offer some background as to that choice of that mix, 5 respectively 8. Is there a kind of a strategy or plan behind that choice?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's largely motivated. It's a combination of cost and convenience. The level 3 chargers are typically used for 20 to 40 minutes, so they're very quick in and out. And the level 2 chargers, people charge for more in the order of an hour and a half to 2 hours. The level 3 chargers are significantly more expensive, over 4 times more expensive, and require a lot more componentry updates. So it is a balance between the two. Looking at the parameters of the funding, we concluded that this was the optimal solution. And this was done in concert with Whistler and Lillooet Nation and Pemberton, who are partners in this. Thank you. Thank you.
A second question, if I may. There is, in your report, it's highlighted that a design feasibility study is required. I was wondering, in that design feasibility study, I note in other jurisdictions that there's attention being paid to the design of the charging stations with respect to accessibility and user-friendly operating for people with handicaps, or in fact for winter conditions as well. New attention given to this. I'm wondering if in our circumstances, is there a comfort or satisfaction with current designs, or is this something that might be considered in the design feasibility study that may be undertaken or otherwise in this project? Attention to accessibility in design.
Great. Through the chair, thank you for the question, Councillor Anderson. It's an excellent point. We have thus far committed to at least one fast charger being in an accessible design, like the equivalent of accessible parking. And so far we've decided that at least one will be in a location that we decided on, and we were definitely thinking about creating accessible level 2 chargers as well. So it's an excellent point, and it's something we are thinking about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Stoner.
Thank you through the chair, and thank you, Mr. Pickett, for bringing this funding opportunity to us. I'm just curious because I remember a previous conversation that we had. I'm going to start yelling again. That we had a conversation around the Community Climate Action Plan and how we maybe didn't actually want to get into the game of providing charging stations. It would be akin to us getting in the game of creating fueling stations or gas stations. And so I'm just curious how our thinking has evolved here, and if we are able to recoup costs through the sale of energy at these charging stations, or if there's limitations there.
Through the chair, that's an excellent point, Councillor Stoner. You're absolutely correct. We did state that our intention was to not get into the business of refueling vehicles. We did come to the conclusion that given the attractiveness of this funding opportunity and a broader interrogation of the available funding, that it is, they're really enabling local governments to construct these. So our plan is to have a third-party operator operate them, so that it is distinct and separate from. And our intention is to charge for the electricity. We do want, electrification is extremely important. However, we still really want people to be using those electrons wisely. And there's a whole suite of other reasons why we want carpooling, local working, active transportation, etc. So we want to be mindful of that. Thank you very much.
Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. One quick follow-up. Your resolution, Mr. Pickett, says that a maximum of 275,000 if project costs would come from reserves. Do we know what reserves those are at this point, and the timeline that money may be required relative to the budget?
Through the chair. So the $275,000 is a conservative estimate. The actual cost is expected to be $214,000. Because the budget is not finalized, we put a bit of extra room in that. This is expected to cost us, I believe, $61,000 in 2022. So the $214,000 is over 4 years, with the last year being quite minimal. And the intent is, I believe, from capital reserve funds. Thank you.
Councilor Pettengill.
Is dual port a specific standard or a sort of the current standard? I'm asking as someone with a car that can't use the level 2 charger at Municipal Hall or in Horseshoe Bay.
Okay, through the chair, I'm not sure if you'll be able to use it. The dual port just means that there's two. There's the ability to charge two vehicles at once. Is my understanding. That's the only uniqueness of it. So I certainly hope we will certainly endeavor to make these as broadly accessible to as many cars as possible. Thank you.
Okay. Further questions? So council, there's a resolution. It was just on the screen. Is there a mover of that resolution? Moved by Councilor Herford, seconded by Mayor Elliott. Further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Pickett.
Thank you very much.
Next item is C, Financial Services, Tourism Squamish Funding. Am I correct? Yep. Is there a presentation in this?
Good evening, Chair. No, there is no presentation on this.
Okay. The staff recommendation is the District of Squamish Fund Tourism Squamish $25,000 in 2020 from the Economic and Community Development segment in the 2020 to 2024 Financial Plan Bylaw. Any comments, Council, or questions? Mayor Elliott.
I was just confused about there was a short-term ask, and then pre-budget we're making a long-term commitment. And so I thought the motion was just to bring back the short-term ask, and then wouldn't the longer-term commitment be then discussed in the budget process?
Through the chair, this is actually for the short-term ask only. The longer-term ask will be coming at a future date. I believe the economic development team will be bringing that back.
But yeah, the motion I read is 25,000 in 2020, period.
Oh, but then I heard you say something about the 2021.
Well, it's in the financial plan bylaw for 2020 to 2024.
Oh, but just 1 year.
We're just talking about 2020.
Okay, great. Sorry, thanks.
Yeah. Further questions or comments? Is there a mover of that recommendation? Councillor Herford moves. Councillor French seconds. Further comment? We'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. And under sub D, Economic Development, District of Squamish Sidewalk and Streetscape Program Extension. And I notice Ms. Mulligan has joined us. Is this your presentation, Ms. Mulligan?
Hi, good evening, Council. It's actually Alicia Woodside that will be presenting on Economic Development's behalf.
Okay, doke. Oh, there she is. Okay.
Hi, sorry, technical difficulties. So I'm just going to share my screen. Sharing. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. Hello, Mayor and Council. I'm Alicia Woodside, Economic Development Specialist at the district. And tonight I'm going to be presenting on the Sidewalk and Streetscape program. Before I begin, I just wanted to share that this has been a really big collaborative effort across the district. So I've been working really closely with real estate and community planning on this, and we've also had important roles played across the district with recreation, building department, fire department, parks, and also outside the district at Vancouver Coastal Health. So a quick recap about the program here. It was launched this past June, and its intent was to leverage municipal assets to help support local businesses through COVID-19 recovery. And the program was carefully designed to support business recovery, community connectedness, and also to enhance physical distancing. As part of this program, staff created 2 new types of permits. So one of them was the temporary patio and sidewalk sales permit, and the other was the temporary park use permit. In the first program, which launched May 29th, food service or retail businesses could obtain a permit to erect a temporary patio or sidewalk sales area. And the idea was that businesses could quickly get a temporary outdoor area set up to expand their operations outside using simple materials like picnic tables, tents, and other temporary concepts. Given the temporary nature of the program, it was set to expire on October 31st, and that's been a condition of the program communicated to businesses all along. In the second program, which launched June 5th, businesses could apply for a permit to bring their operations outside into district park space. And that program was also set to expire on October 31st. So I thought I'd briefly touch on some of the outcomes with these programs since they launched. So I guess to start with the temporary patio and sidewalk sales program, in addition to the notes that we have in front of you, 10 out of those 10 approved patios, 9 were operational this summer. 1 business was yet to open. While we had a good uptake of the temporary patios, we did not get any applications in for sidewalk street sales. And after speaking with retail businesses, we learned that this was likely due to staffing issues and inability to have a staff outside with their merchandise on the sidewalks. And then looking at the temporary park use program, it was similar numbers. So we had 12 temporary park uses approved and a very big range of different uses from outdoor yoga, dance classes, and also artisan sales for small entrepreneurs. And while 12 uses might not look like a big number, it actually it contributed to a lot of hours of programming in the parks. One interesting part of the park use program was that lots of local nonprofit organizations were able to use the program. And so it was used by Sea to Sky Community Services, Squamish Minor Hockey, Vancouver Coastal Health, and also a faith-based community group. So these are just some of the images of temporary patios that were approved and erected this summer throughout Squamish. So I'll briefly go through some of the engagement we did to review the programs. So a big part of our engagement was having phone calls with businesses that participated in the programs. And we gave every business the opportunity to have conversations with us about how their patio went this summer. We learned that businesses were very happy with the temporary patio and sidewalk sale program. when we asked them to rate the usefulness of the program to their business, on a scale out of 10, with 10 being very useful, we found that 9 of the 10 businesses rated it either 9 or 10 out of 10. And they rated the success of their patio as 8.4 out of 10. And the reason it wasn't always a 10 was just definitely based on individual business circumstances. So for example, one business didn't have a food license, and they found that that would have been more effective for their patio. And several businesses reported that these patios were really critical to their business's summer, as it helped them to recover some seating that they lost due to physical distancing requirements. One business stated that they would have likely have had to close down permanently if it wasn't for this program. And 8 out of 10 said if they were given the chance, they would like to use this program through winter. So in looking at the park use program, we also were in touch with all the businesses and nonprofits that participated here. And 9 of the 12 organizations took part in our interviews. We also got, really positive sentiments from this program as well. Organizations, 9 of the participating organizations rated it as 9 or 10 out of 10 in terms of usefulness to their business. And they rated the success of their program in the park as an 8 out of 10 overall on average. When we asked how many of the participants would want to continue into winter, we got 4 of the 9 that said they would want to continue. And one of the big factors we found was that many were hesitant to operate their programs in the cold weather, especially when their programs cater to vulnerable populations in some cases, such as newborn babies, seniors, and youth. And when we asked businesses how we could improve this program, several pointed to the need for more outdoor covered sheltered spaces in our parks. And this would allow them to continue with their programs on rainy days, and it would make the winter more feasible for them to continue their operations outside. We noticed that many of these organizations booked the USIAM Pavilion as a site because it provided flexibility in case of rainy weather, even in the summer. So that's wraps up those pieces. We also reached out to many of our partners and key business stakeholders, including the Squamish Farmers Market, Tourism Squamish, the Chamber of Commerce, and the Downtown Business Improvement Association. And in general, these organizations were also really supportive of the programs. They told us that they were appreciative of how quickly these programs were launched and how useful they were to the local business community to recover revenue. And the Downtown BA in particular shared that they felt the programs helped to create a vibrant and thriving downtown. All of these organizations reported the same feedback, that the sidewalk portion of the temporary patio and sidewalk permit wasn't accessible to the retailers because of the staffing challenge associated with it. But that said, they were still really supportive of having given that chance to businesses. And they said, they encouraged the district to continue offering the permit in case circumstances change and businesses are able to take advantage. And in general, they shared that businesses are really looking for flexibility right now. So to complete our engagement, we also had a survey for the general public. The survey launched September 30th, and we just closed it on Monday. And in our staff report, you can see top-line results that were from a few days after the surveys launched. The results are still consistent with that. This slide is really, I can read out maybe the figures, because for some reason, I think over email, it's deleted the figures from my slide. But essentially, we have somewhat support is 73% in the pie chart, and strongly support is 73%, somewhat support is 4%, neutral is 8%, somewhat opposed is 8%, and strongly opposed is 8%. Sorry, I can't see the data values. I'm guessing you guys can't either. And back to sharing the general feedback, this is consistent with the top line results that are shared in the staff report. I just want to point out that there are only 35 participants in this survey, so it's not a statistically significant sample size of our community. That said, the results can still be informative to us, and especially when we look at the qualitative aspects of the survey. Overall, the reactions are really positive. The results indicate, as I mentioned, that 73% of respondents strongly support the district continuing with the program. And in contrast to that, 8% were strongly opposed. When asked why, the top reasons for supporting the program was that it adds vibrancy to the street, it supports economic recovery, and that it creates a neighborhood feel. And finally, it also allows the public to enjoy the business's products and services safely. Several people commented on the patios that sprouted up, saying that the streets became more alive and the ability to dine outside made them feel more comfortable in the context of COVID-19. The few that opposed continuing with the program said that it takes up valuable sidewalk space and creates too many bottlenecks. Expanding in the comments, one of the participants suggested that patios downtown interfered with their ability to find parking. And of the 279 downtown commercial parking stalls that were identified in the 2017 parking inventory survey, 3 were used as part of this program to create temporary patio spaces. And just to wrap, a minority 9% of the respondents felt that the district could do even more here and said, I'd like to see even more street rebalancing to allow more room for pedestrians and physical distancing. In those comments, the participants elaborated, suggesting partial street closures, one-way streets, or select pedestrian blocks on Cleveland to allow even more room for pedestrians, bikes, and so on. When we look at the feedback altogether, we see that the summer program is likely made an appropriate trade-off between supporting businesses to quickly and safely expand while ensuring there is enough space for pedestrians and bikes. So I'll quickly walk through some options for the winterized program. On September 18th, the Provincial Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Board published a new policy directive that's included in the staff report. It's Directive 2026. And this policy states that the temporary expanded service areas are now set to expire 1 year later than they originally were, as long as the local authority is supportive. And in parallel with the engagement exercise, we also did extensive internal consultation with several district staff. And we wanted to assess the feasibility of running these programs in the winter time. So for the temporary patio and sidewalk sales program, staff determined that the program would be feasible through winter. From a building and fire perspective, there are no concerns with operating the existing temporary patios in winter. If businesses would like to add heaters or temporary shelters to their patios, in that case, staff would need to review those requests to ensure that they meet building, fire, and safety requirements. From a snow clearing perspective, Public Works advised that the program is still feasible in winter. Staff would need to make a minor change during snow cleaning to ensure there is enough room between the burn of the snow and the temporary patio perimeters. And for the temporary park use program, staff determined that it would not be ideal to encourage the use of the program through winter. A key reason here is that there is limited sheltered space available in parks, and that really limits the experience for the users of this program. Currently, the only option in parks is in the USIM Pavilion. And in addition to that, staff focus their snow clearing on safe routes to school. And as a result, sidewalks adjacent to parks may not be cleared as a priority of snow and ice. So with these, with the engagement and with the staff review in mind, our proposed plan is as follows. First, we propose providing extensions to all current permit holders for the temporary park use program to match the new policy granted by the liquor board that I just went through. For efficiency and to support the best experience for businesses, staff recommend that businesses should not need to apply to receive the extension and that the extension is automatic. Any amendments required to license agreements will be sent to permit holders, including a clause for those businesses maintaining a parking stall patio in the winter, that the district would not be responsible for any damage from district maintenance, including snow removal and salting. And second, to ensure an optimal safety for fire and building requirements, we recommend creating a streamlined change request process if businesses would like to add additional heaters or temporary shelters to their patios. And finally, we propose providing new refreshed guidelines to help businesses understand the differences between the temporary program and the permanent program and which program is right for them. For the temporary park use program, we recommend pausing the program at this time and reassessing the need for the program in spring as the COVID-19 pandemic and business needs evolve. Current participants showed limited interest in continuing with the program through the winter, and in the event of snow, parks can be closed or not maintained. And in addition, to support other businesses who perhaps cannot take advantage of those two programs, we also plan to support the Squamish Farmers Market, enabling them to extend in their current location on the district-owned parking lot. So in terms of project plan, there would be no budget needed for this. It's predominantly staff time, and timing would be effective nearly immediately because these permits are expiring October 31st. So we'd be looking to update the website materials right away to support those businesses. And our two recommendations this evening are that Council approve the following resolutions: that staff extend the temporary patio and sidewalk sale program to October 31st, 2021 to align with extensions for temporary expanded service areas from the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch, and that staff pause the temporary park use program for the winter period after its expiry and assess the value of pursuing the program again in spring 2021 as part of an overall review of local economic conditions and business needs. Sorry, that's a bit long. And yeah, thank you if you have questions.
Thank you very much. Council, I'll go to you for questions. First of all, I'm advised by staff that we will be considering, or we should consider, those two resolutions separately, if that affects any of your questions or thinking on this. And I saw Mayor Elliott's hand. Go ahead. And Councillor Herbert.
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. I'm glad to see this has been so successful, and that we're going to smooth the path to October of next year for the patios. With regard to the park use, have staff spent any time investigating for the 2021 budget, putting in covered areas in addition to OCM Pavilion, given that we knew this was going to be a need back in the spring, and projections for the pandemic take us well into next year, if not the year after. So are we looking at that for 2021 to provide more covered spaces? I know we have a grant request associated with the Wellness Center at Brennan Park, but that would take years to construct versus just buying a few shade sales and rain sales for the 2021 budget.
And I saw Ms. Glende's hand. Go to Glende.
Thank you.
To the chair, I can take this one. That yes, in addition to the grant application, staff are currently working on investigating options to bring forward for the budget for 2021.
Thank you.
I have Councillor Herford and Councillor Pettengill. And then,
Well,
go ahead,
can I
Mayor
follow
Elliott.
up then? Sorry, that leaves the question, if we suspend the park use program and then put money in the 2021 budget to put up a shade sail, would we revisit it then? So if someone came to us, Ms. Woodside, and said, well, you just put up a shade sail in whatever park, and I'd like to use that now, and say it's March.
We would, through the chair, we would like to consider bringing the program back in the spring, and we would look to align that with any budgeting that's done for sheltered spaces.
But if we suspend this program now, you wouldn't consider an ask partway through the winter if someone found a way to make it work?
Through the chair, we did have fairly limited interest in this program, and that's one of the main reasons why we're recommending pausing it. What we did find is that a lot of nonprofits were using the program, and those nonprofits contributed to a lot of the hours in programming that I mentioned during the presentation. And they were not going to be considering offering their programs outside in the winter because some of the programs were for vulnerable populations. And so that's the main rationale behind why we're recommending pausing the program and potentially bringing it back when the weather's more favorable in the spring.
Good. So I have Councillor Herford, Councillor Pettengill, Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. I had a similar line of questioning to Mayor Elliott, but so given that there's a demand or a shortage of these covered spaces, I'm wondering what is the cost associated with keeping the program open, even though the demand is dropping, to help us manage the one space that we have. So if someone does want to run something in our one accessible covered space through the winter, because they've got hardy souls that want to participate, what mechanism do we have for them to do that, and what is the difference between pausing or stopping the program and restarting it versus having it sit idle due to demand, but having the mechanism there to handle the demand of our one covered space, if you follow me.
And maybe I'll start, and I know from real estate's also on the call. So through the mayor, the main difference is that in our previous council meetings, we passed a motion to suspend fees of USIM Pavilion. And so that's the main difference with pausing the program or continuing it. I guess nonprofits are we already work with nonprofits as part of ongoing recreation programming. And so there's nothing that would preclude nonprofits from continuing to use district park space. It would just be a slightly different process. It would be what they previously did in the past by emailing staff. And nonprofits, for the nonprofits, the USIM Pavilion fee does not apply to them. And so the main difference you're on the call if you wanted to elaborate on the real estate process.
Go ahead, Ms. Gill.
Through the chair, yeah, just to add that there's nothing that precludes people from still inquiring about using parks in the winter. So what we would do is, yeah, the only difference is that the UCM Pavilion does have a fee associated with it, whereas for businesses, we had waived the fee during this period. So what we could do is if there was say we did put up another structure, just to answer Mayor Elliott, we could come back to council and revisit that at that time too, if we wanted to waive fees, if there was a new structure in place as well.
Thank you. And Ms. Glendy, did I miss you? Did you have your hand up?
I did, but it's fine now. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Herford, you okay?
Yeah, no, that's okay for now. Thank you.
Okay. I have Councillor Pettengill, Councillor Stoner.
So so I'm clear as well. If we kept this program running instead of pausing it, the only risk is that you know, a few people might use it without having to pay a fee, and there wouldn't really be an extra burden on staff to keep that open. Is that correct?
Through the chair, it's a fairly streamlined process with an online booking process, and it's very nimble. So there isn't a large staff overhead involved in running the program.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Stoner.
My questions have been asked, so I will skip. Thank you.
For those that didn't hear, her question had been asked. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Herford.
Thank you. Back to the park space, I respect staff's opinion around some of the facilities are, well, we're not getting asked for them, and they are wet, and many of the parks are wet and maybe couldn't handle the traffic if we were asked for them. Does the existing process in its streamlined state still account for what for maybe sort of blocking off some of the assets if we decide to continue the program through the winter, blocking off some of the assets that just couldn't handle the traffic? Is that easy enough to do in the framework that we have at this point?
Through the chair, could you please clarify your question around blocking off? I don't know if I understand the intent of blocking off.
Thank you. I mean, if we decide one of our parks is just too wet to run a program, even on a sunny day in the winter, and it's just not available for the program, does the existing program have that ability to sort of turn on and off these locations? Or I guess where I'm really going is turn everything off, but the one covered space that we do have. Is that something we can do inside our program, or do we need to go revert to some other program to be able to do that effectively?
Alicia, I can answer that one. So how bookings are done now are through the booking clerk at Brennan Park, and she's in consultation with Park. So if a park for some reason couldn't be used, then she would know that and have it blocked off in the system. So all the inquiries are filtered through the booking clerk kind of thing. So she would know which ones are available and which ones are not. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay. Further questions or comments? So there are two recommendations. We'll deal with them separately. The first one is that staff extend the temporary patio and sidewalk sale program to October 31st, 2021 to align with new extensions for temporary expanded service areas from the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch. Is there a mover of that recommendation? Councillor Herford, second to Councillor Stoner. Further comment? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. The second recommendation is that staff pause the temporary park use program for the winter period after its expiry on October 31st, 2020, and assess the value of pursuing the program again in spring 2021 as part of an overall review of local economic conditions and business needs. Is there a mover of that recommendation? Mayor Elliott. Seconded by Councillor French. Would anybody like to speak to this? Nope. Councillor Herford, go ahead.
I didn't hear a compelling enough case to me to cancel this program. We're looking at increasing our year-round usage of our facilities, and to me, lowering the barriers for their use is part of that. I think the weather has effectively canceled a lot of the assets involved in this program, but it's also added value with our one covered space. And as we consider budget asks for more covered space, I think that we should be doing what we can to make sure the one that we do have is used to its maximum capacity. And by the sounds of it, there's not a huge administrative burden to continue to offer through the winter to the hardy souls that would like to be out there or need to be out there for the safety of the participants. So I don't see, I won't be supporting this, and I didn't see a compelling enough argument to repeal the program at this time.
Further comment? Mayor Elliott.
I think we don't know how this pandemic is going to evolve. And I think just leaving the program idle gives us more flexibility and nimbleness to respond rather than canceling it outright. It sounds like it will just sleep in the background and may encourage more use at OCM Pavilion if there aren't fees through the winter. And I don't think that's a bad thing. To keep giving the community an opportunity to use a covered space and to come out and be together in a distance way. So I'd rather just see this lay low and then, as you say, revisit all of our programs in the spring, depending on where we're at economically and with the sentiments of the community, and hopefully some new covered spaces approved in the 2021 budget.
Councillor Pettengill.
Yeah, and I would not support pausing this program over the winter. I think I would like to see it kept open. I hope that too, if people have the means, if there are places that aren't grass, so they have their own tent, and maybe the tile area at Stan Clark or around the cenotaph there. If people have an interest, personally, I think it would be positive to see those areas activated. Wouldn't have an expectation that we do snow clearing and that sort of thing, but if someone can just go and manage it on their own, I would like to see us support that over the winter. Just as a side note, it did strike me because we've been talking about more covered spaces and so on, the thought that it might not be wise to have people in some of our parks during the wet seasons. And so I think it's separate from this, but I hope we are also going to be thinking about ground coverings and making sure that more of our parks can be used regardless of the season.
Further comment? I'll put myself on the list. I am going to support this. I think this is appropriate, and I think if I understand the report and the staff presentation correctly, there's a relatively small number of businesses or organizations that might be interested in this at all. And if they are, and the weather cooperates, there is a way that they can deal with it on a slightly different, but probably not onerous process. So I think this is okay. I mean, one of the things I worry about, having been a field user in my past, is the damage to fields in some cases. OCM Pavilion certainly is undercover and it's made of concrete. But that, from my mind, is about the only one that might be suitable for some of these things over the winter time. And there is a way that if there are organizations that really want to use it and the weather's okay and it's suitable for them, then I think it would be available to them. So I think, generally speaking, this program could be paused and picked up in the spring with very little negative impact on our community, if any. So I will be supporting this motion. Further comment? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Pettengill, Councillor Stoner, Councillor Herford, Mayor Elliott opposed. The motion fails. Does anybody have an alternate motion, or will we just leave it at that? Seeing nothing. Go ahead, Ms. Gill.
I just want to mention that if we have to do a bylaw amendment to waive the OCM Pavilion fees, so we would have to come back with that if we wanted, if council wants to proceed with that.
Okay. At the moment, that's not in front of us, so we'll just see how that unfolds. Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Woodside. Councillor Stoner.
I thought Councillor Herford had his hands up, so I was going to let him do it. But I will move that staff extend the temporary park use program to October 31st, 2021, in line with the temporary patio and sidewalk permit.
Is there a second? Councillor Herford, you're seconding? Yep. Is there comment about that or discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
I'll just speak to it briefly. I think my council colleagues made some good points earlier in terms of there isn't a huge amount of demand for this through the winter, but I did hear in Ms. Woodside's presentation that there are some who are interested in still participating in it, and I think that it is easier to maintain this program as is, and hopefully we see some greater uptake, especially with perhaps some additional covered spaces through the winter. And I do believe that staff will be able to manage if they are concerned about use of particular field areas that are frozen or waterlogged and are not appropriate for that. Then I leave it with staff to manage those fields and those bookings. But I think this just opens up some of our community spaces for our community programming, and I would like to see that happen. Thanks.
Okay. Further comment? Councillor Herford.
Thank you. I'll be supporting this motion, and I also respect that the demand has dropped off in the winter from the organizations or individuals looking to participate, but also some of the facilities just wouldn't be suitable in the winter from just a facilities upkeep standpoint. So I do understand that, and I expect staff to manage that accordingly. But I do think that we should be doing what we can to make sure that the assets we do have are used to their highest capacity, particularly through this time. And I hope to over time increase the amount of covered spaces in our public areas as well. But that's maybe a topic for another day. So thank you.
Okay. Further comment? Councillor Bentonville.
Yeah, I'll be supporting this. I was originally going to propose something that put this until March, just being worried, well, what if it gets really busy in the spring and summer? But from the sounds of things, we weren't anticipating a high volume of use anyways. So in terms of a possible revenue shortfall, that doesn't, I guess I would be surprised if that would be a concern. So I'm comfortable having this extend to October to match the other program.
Okay. Further comment? Nope. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Next item, Council, is the consent agenda. Anything on the consent agenda which presents a conflict of interest for council members, or any items you wish to debate or vote upon, must be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. So, are there any items anybody would wish to discuss? And I'll remind you that there was one addition to the correspondence referred to staff on the amended agenda, which was number sub 15, the guest response to regarding swimming. Councillor Pettengill.
Wanted to pull the October 13 Committee of the Whole minutes for correction, and then letters 1 and 7.
7 will be a problem. That position has been filled, I'm told, and therefore it is a personnel matter and should be dealt with in closed, not open.
I was just going to ask that it be referred to staff for a future discussion.
Okay. And any others? I got Councillor Anderson.
Yes, also with Councillor Pettingill, the minutes for the Committee of the Whole meeting October 23rd, I have a correction to offer.
Beg your pardon?
October 13th.
October 23rd or 13?
Excuse me. I'll double check that. That's October 13.
Okay. And there's just the one item?
Yes, please.
Yep. Further? Seeing nothing, so we will deal with the minutes now and take the letter later.
The minutes, so the correspondence under 13 and then minutes under 14.
Okay. So I'm advised by staff that we will deal with the minutes under item 14 and the correspondence under item 13. Apart from that, is somebody prepared to move receipt or move the consent agenda? Mary Elliott, second by Councillor Stoner. Comment? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. There are no late agenda items, correspondence, action requested. First one is J. Norman, the district lots 509, 510. Staff recommendation is that it be referred to community planning for follow-up and response. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Herford. Any comment? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Second is C. Oos, the Garibaldi Way traffic concern and noise, and the recommendation is that be referred to engineering for follow-up and response. Is there a mover of that? Councillor Stoner, second. Councillor Herford. Any comment? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Third is Heather Dunham, Recrumpet Meadows Sub-Area Plan. Staff recommendation that the correspondence from Heather Dunham regarding Crumpet Meadows Sub-Area Plan be referred to community planning for follow-up and response. I have a question on that, but I'll go to Councillor Herford first. Were you moving the motion? You can hold off. Yeah, I just have a question. Is there any staff that can speak to that?
Is Jonas on?
No, Mr. Buxton's not there.
Jonas, we just have to get them up. Gary's there. Yeah.
Hang on, we're just getting Mr. Belanishkas up, or Mr. Buxton.
Gary.
Yeah, Mr. Buxton, are you able to speak to that? My question is, the letter is with respect to being able to start the sub-area process quickly. Are we able to give any kind of a time estimate when that might be? And I am also including the possibility of the developer funding a planner. You're muted, Mr. Buxton.
Through the chair, those discussions, I believe, already took place, I believe, last Thursday initially with the letter writer. So that process has already started. Where it goes, I don't know, but the discussion around funding of a position was part of those discussions.
Okay, well, I won't go into that further. I'm happy to move that it be referred to community planning, follow up and response if necessary. Second by Councillor Herford. Any further discussion or comment? Call the question, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The fourth is Young Cannabis Retail Store, 2nd Avenue. And the staff recommendation is that be referred to community planning for follow-up and response. Is there a mover of that? Moved by Councillor French, second Councillor Stoner. Further discussion? Call the question. Yeah, Mayor Elliott.
Sorry, lost my cursor. We have continued correspondence about this issue. And is our definition of school clear enough in our bylaw to help avoid this type of confusion in the future? Is there, yeah.
Mr. Buxton, are you able to answer that?
Not off the top of my head, but I will get Mr. Valanishkis to get an answer to council relatively quickly on that.
Thank you.
So then the motion might read, be referred to community planning for follow-up and response to the writer and council. That be fair? Is that a friendly amendment? Okay. Further comment? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Number 5 is C. Lottenry Swimming in Squamish. Staff recommendation is it be referred to the Director of Recreation for follow-up and response. But one of the additions to the agenda was the follow-up and response. So I'm not sure it's necessary to deal with that. So I'll leave it. And addition under item 13, we wanted to deal with letters number 1 and number 7. So Councillor Pettengill, letter number 1.
Yes, thank you, Chair. October is Foster Family Month, and I just wanted to call this out and thank the families that provide foster homes. One of the things I do in my spare time is volunteer with a program that has a fair number of kids that are in foster care, and with COVID, I don't know if the program is going to run this year, and I think that's the situation for a lot of programs that a lot of people that need support really depend on, and so it is times like this when foster families are really important. So just want to take the time to acknowledge everyone who does this good work, and thank you very much.
Thank you. And letter 7.
Yes, and as stated, I would like to move that this be referred to staff for a future conversation.
Conversation with whom? With us?
I believe so. I would leave that in staff's hands. I think that is the intent.
Okay. So may I suggest that the motion reads refer to staff for future conversation with council?
Sure. Yeah.
Is there a seconder? I'll second it. Any comment? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And if we want to move receipt of number 1, Councillor Pettengill, do you want to move receipt of that letter?
Yes, thank you. I will move receipt of number 1.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Herford. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And that puts us to number 14, approval of minutes. So the first is we'll deal with the October 13th Committee of the Whole, Councillor Pettengill. And then we also have an issue with that with Councillor Anderson afterwards. So go ahead, Councillor Pettengill.
Yes, thank you. In the discussion on the Loggers Lane neighborhood plan, one of the recorded council comments is that district infrastructure containing buildings should be subject to the same geotechnical hazard setbacks, but I believe the discussion was actually that our zoning decisions should be governed by a consistent assessment and tolerance of risk, regardless of whether the risk is a natural risk. And so it wasn't tied to municipal infrastructure or anything like that. It was more about zoning versus risk.
Councillor Stoner.
My recollection that those were two separate comments, that there was a comment about municipal infrastructure being part of or being subject to. You need me to speak up. So my understanding was that those are two separate issues, that there was a discussion about municipal infrastructure being subject to the guidelines and the setbacks, especially on steep slopes. And then there was another conversation or discussion point that you brought up, Councillor Pettengill, on the topic that you just discussed. So my understanding was that it was not an either or, it was an and.
Okay.
And my recollection actually was with respect to the risk management. I believe Mr. Buxton made the comment that that's quite a significant issue. And having gone through that with the barrier, that took a couple of years and a lot of consultants and a lot of money to come up with a risk matrix. I don't know what it would be for every project, but and that was, so my recollection was we did not proceed with that requirement. But I'll leave that open to other members of council. And Mr. Buxton, do you have a recollection of that?
I share Councillor Stoner's recollection.
Go ahead, Councillor Pettengill.
And just to be clear, there was not, I don't think, an ask that staff embark on this risk assessment. It was that, in general, the zoning should adhere to the risk, and you know, maybe up to proponent to provide that, or for us to at least ask the proponent. But I think, you know, we had a discussion about the risk and zoning. We didn't get into who should do that risk assessment.
So, Councillor Stoner, rather, for my benefit, could you repeat your comment about how the minutes should read, and if somebody can tell me if that's consistent with the way the minutes do read?
I actually don't have a suggestion for the addition that Councillor Pettengill is trying to put in. My comment was that I don't think that they're substitutable, so I would leave the minutes as is. And if Councillor Pettengill felt like his comments were not captured, that he bring forward a sentence that would capture his comments.
Go ahead, Councillor Pettengill.
Okay, sorry, I missed the piece about the district infrastructure, so my apologies there. So I would just request then that the minutes be inclusive of the idea that our zoning decisions should be governed by a consistent assessment and tolerance of risk, regardless of whether or not that risk is a natural risk.
Sorry? Yeah. Okay, so we're trying to take minutes. If you could please repeat that a little slower.
Okay. Our zoning decisions should be governed by a consistent assessment and tolerance of risk, regardless of whether or not that risk is a natural risk.
Yeah, not regardless.
Maybe if you could email it to staff.
Sure.
And somebody can help me. I'll go to staff on this. Did we decide that, or are we just trying to rewrite the minutes now? Go ahead, Councillor Pettengill.
My recollection was that that was captured in the summary, and that's why I didn't raise it at the time, is I thought that staff captured that in the summary that was stated on the 13th.
Okay. Is that consistent with Council's recollection? Okay. So with that sentence, which you'll email to staff included, I'll hold off on a motion to approve that minute and go to Councillor Anderson.
I'd like to offer a correction to the same minutes for October 13th, Committee of the Whole. At the bottom of page 2 in the draft minutes, under the section Future of Residual Waste Management, there's a reference to liaison with, quote, wider region including West Vancouver and Sunshine Coast. The correction would be to substitute Metro Vancouver for West Vancouver. Just a small typo there, but just so that we don't mislead future discussions, it was the two regions that I had in mind, Sunshine Coast Regional District and Metro Vancouver. That's my suggestion.
That was my recollection as well. Is Council okay with that? You get that one? Metro instead of West. With those two amendments in mind, is there a motion to approve the October 13th Committee of the Whole meeting minutes? Moved by Councillor Herford, second Councillor Anderson. Further comment? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And still under item 14, sub 1, recommendations from the Committee of the Whole of October 13th, future of residual waste management landfill expansion. There's a motion there. I'm not going to read it. It's quite extensive. Moved by Mayor Elliott. Seconder, Councillor Anderson. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And second one is District of Squamish zoning bylaw 2744 for 37773 Cleveland Avenue, that the Committee of the Whole received the October 13th, 2020 report from Community Planning on the proposed rezoning application at 3773 Cleveland Avenue and provide feedback as follows: control of noise from rooftop patio amenity space and concern regarding parking and shared transportation arrangement. Is there a mover of that? Councillor French, second Councillor Herford. Comment? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And under the draft marine zoning update, there are a number of bullet points. I don't propose to read them. Is somebody prepared to move those? Councillor Stoner? Second Councillor Anderson. Any comment? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Low carbon and smart growth neighborhood incentive programs. The Council received the report, October 13th report from Community Planning, to provide feedback as noted by staff, and that staff prepare bylaws for low carbon and smart growth neighborhood incentive programs based on feedback received at the October 13th, 2020 Committee of the Whole, and that additional community engagement be conducted, and that staff bring forward the bylaws for first reading consideration. Is there a mover of that? Councillor Stoner, seconded by Mayor Elliott. Any comment? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And the draft Loggers East neighborhood plan, the Council received the draft Loggers East neighborhood plan report dated October 13th, 2020 from Community Planning for information and provide comments as noted by staff. Is there a mover of that? Councillor French, second Councillor Stoner. Any comment? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So 15, business arising from the minutes. There is one item, and we want to change the designation community patrol officers to Squamish bylaw enforcement officers. We're adding the word enforcement. So the staff recommendation is that Council appoint Laura Lazaridis and Sarah Kennedy as District of Squamish bylaw enforcement officers. Is there a mover of that? Moved by Mayor Elliott, second by Councillor Stoner. Any comment? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. There are no committee minutes and reports. Council, any staff or in-camera announcements? No, there are no in-camera announcements. There's no unscheduled public attendance. Open question period. Seeing none. Councilor staff announcements. Any members of council? Councilor Anderson, and then Councilor French.
Council may remember that just over a year ago, we received a presentation from the Sea to Sky Nordics Club asking us to endorse their effort to obtain the World Ski Championships for our region. And it was a very well thought out, well-baked presentation, and we did endorse that proposal. I have in front of me the press release, which you may have seen already, and I'll just read the title. Canada wins bid to host 2023 Nordic Junior and Under 23 World Ski Championships in, wait for it, Squamish/Whistler. I would very much appreciated the attention that Squamish received in this press release from Nordic Canada organization. But congratulations to Sea to Sky Nordics for all the work they did behind the scenes to achieve this new event that's going to unfold for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor French.
Thank you. It was Rivers Day on Sunday, and an event was held at McNaughton Park in Valleycliff. I attended. There were a bunch of booths and displays. It was all very educational, very well put together, socially distanced. So a big thank you to everybody that helped to put that on. And I understand it was delayed. There was an original date and it got pushed back a couple weeks. So good on the people that persisted and made Rivers Day happen for this year.
Good. Councilor Stoner.
I would be remiss to not mention that it is Waste Reduction Week. And I hope that all my council colleagues are joining in the challenge to zero waste for the week. We have one of our sustainability specialists coming to actually weigh both of our waste as well as our recyclable and diversion rates at the end of the week. I think I was doing pretty well, and I will say, Mayor Elliott, that after my post on social media, I had a friend come and deliver some loose leaf tea, so I no longer have to use tea bags and tea bag wrappers. Because I think that's what was putting me behind Mayor Elliott until today. So the competition is stiff, but it is an important challenge, and hopefully it does garner a bit of attention through our community about the importance of reducing our waste, because we know that through the conversations we've been having, the impact on our landfill is both mostly a costly endeavor, if nothing else. So it's important for us to start reducing our waste. I also just wanted to flag to the community that a number of us from council will be participating on Friday in the Howe Sound Community Forum, which brings community members from around Howe Sound together. An important dialogue on how we work together across the region. So looking forward to that on Friday from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m.
Thank you. And I'm always trying to reduce my waste. I went for a bike ride this morning to try to do that, but we'll see how it works. Councilor Pettengill, and then Mayor Elliott.
Thank you. A couple things. Got to spend some time at the FCM Sustainability Conference this morning, and it's going on for the next couple of days. I was disappointed last year when it was just too expensive to attend, and one of the benefits of everything being online is that I can actually attend this year, and so far it's been quite informative. Last week I was able to attend VLRs, which is voluntary local reporting about the Sustainable Development Goals, and it was quite interesting to join as a smaller community to hear about where that reporting is. It was mostly bigger centers that were talking about it. We did have a resolution forward to UBCM, which didn't get discussed. So it is something I've been thinking about, and I don't know, maybe it's some committee of the whole, I can share some of what's relevant from that. The final thing is the Squamish Arts Council has been funding some programming through the Squamish Academy of Music once a month. So if you haven't done music before, it's kind of an in thing during COVID. Everyone's taking up music, and they're offering sort of introductory programs to music one Saturday night a month. So you can go for an hour, and this past Saturday it was learning to sing. So we're all trying to sort of sing in our own space and no one could hear us, but we could see each other. So that was kind of cool. And so people should check that out if you have any sort of interest and you've always sort of been afraid to try music. It's a great way to try it out.
And then, is it Mary Elliott, I think?
Yeah, I just want to take a moment to pass on my sincere appreciation to the Squamish Firefighters Union, Local 2874, and Squamish Fire Rescue in general for the amazing Fire Ops Day on the Saturday of the Thanksgiving long weekend. And so much work went into that, and I just really appreciate the effort. And also just huge kudos to the Watershed Society for Rivers Day. Anybody brave enough to put on an event and provide an outlet for our community to gather safely deserves a huge pat on the back. It's not simple to do. And so I just really appreciate all of our community groups, same with the Arts Council, that are putting so much time and effort into finding ways to continue to bring us together, even as the sun is not shining as much. And so appreciate that very, very much.
Anyone else? Seeing nothing, I will look for a motion to terminate. Councillor Stoner, Councillor Harford. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. See you next week.
Thank you for chairing, Councillor Rafe.
You're welcome.
Have a good night.